As you were saying there, Adrian, good and bad within the industry, and there's some companies who are legitimately doing it, others who are rogue callers. I'm really pleased that we've got the head of a call centre on the line with us now, David Freedman, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Confero Call Centres. Morning to you, David. Great that you've joined us. Thanks very much indeed, because I guess you can tell us from the other end of the spectrum, we're all pulling our hair out with these nuisance calls. We're just wondering why you guys make them.
Good morning. We don't make nuisance calls, so I guess that's the first thing to point out. There is a very legitimate industry, and has been for as long as probably most of us can remember, in calling consumers about all sorts of things that they may be interested in. Our role is as an outsourced call centre, so we work on behalf of a range of different clients, and part of that role is to understand what our clients' products and services are, and then go and talk to consenting, interested or potentially interested consumers. And
so they've got to give their consent beforehand before you actually make that call. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely key. I mean, the road companies that you've just been discussing, and there's many of them, and like your other guest was talking about, nearly 4 billion rogue spam calls made in the last year is just a complete blight on our industry, and it's caused most of us in our personal capacities, even though our professional capacity might be different, to absolutely hate the thought of answering the phone at home in case it's one of these companies calling. However, the phone is a fantastic way to communicate. I mean, we're doing that now, and it's a great way to communicate, and without it, we're just stuck with email or the internet and so on.
So how do people give their consent to you beforehand then, David? I just want to get the sort of the pattern of how it works. I mean, is it a case that they'll have, I don't know, gone somewhere and registered and said, yeah, it's fine to give me a call? Is that the way it happens? Tell me what the sort of procedure is.
So there are a number of ways. In its simplest format and the purest, if you like. If you're a business that promotes a certain product, you may have spoken to a person at some point in the past and asked them for their permission to call them again in the future about your products and services. So in its purest form, that would be one way that you would be on a list. Another way might be, I think you talked about something like surveys, for example, and you might be asked, would you be interested in hearing from someone about a new mortgage product, or would you be interested in hearing from someone about, are you looking for life insurance, and would you be interested in hearing from someone about that, for example? And if you say yes and give your details, then you've consented to being called by a particular company or service. Now, GDPR does come in. We won't go into the technicalities of that, which is
the new data protection that we've got, the guidelines coming in through now. Yeah,
that's right. But there was a company fined by the ICO last month called Approved Green Energy Solutions, and one of the failings of the directors is that they admitted, and this is the quote from the ICO, that he had no understanding of his obligations. And so we absolutely promote calling with the right consents to call people that are not on TPS, people that have agreed to have a call. And actually, it's inexcusable that a director of a business says that he just didn't understand the regulation. And we are completely on the same page as the government that fines should come in. And directors should be fined individually, because suddenly they will understand their obligations, and it will no longer be an excuse.
It'd be interesting, and it's good to hear that you welcome these as well, because I appreciate that the fact that there are nuisance callers, it can give industries, the whole industry, a bad name, David. But you could appreciate the person on the other end of the phone who's been called, even if there's been some interest shown in the past in your product or whatever you're calling about. Sometimes it's really hard to differentiate between what could be a legitimate call like yours, with the sort of the basic appreciation that there's an interest there, and a hoax call, particularly if you're an elderly person perhaps, or a person by yourself, maybe slightly hard of hearing or whatever. It's very hard to differentiate between them because nobody actually sort of stops and says, this is a genuine call. If you do not want to hear from me, I completely understand if you put the phone down. I mean, it's you can understand the person on the other end of the line can sometimes find it hard to differentiate between them.
It's incredibly frustrating. I sit on the Direct Marketing Association Council for Contact Centres, and we spend enormous amounts of time, and have done for years, in debating how can we help consumers to still enjoy the telephone, to still enjoy hearing from companies about products or services they might be interested in, but how do we stop these rogue callers? And we've got not only the issue of businesses here who say they don't understand regulations, or they're just flouting them and ignoring them, but of course we've also got companies offshore who are outside of the law, and that's very difficult to stop again.
Yeah, policing that must be a nightmare.
But it's maybe just taking 2 seconds to listen to who is calling you, and just see if you've got some recognition of that. You might have bought a car, for example, from your local dealership, and they may be calling you. You may have had the car 2, 3, 4 years, and they may be calling you to talk to you about new offers or services around the car that you own. Now, you'd probably be happy to hear from that dealer, as long as you've had a good experience and you've said that you're happy to hear from them again. So and there's lots of examples like that, where they are legitimate calls. So certainly our message is just to be, I guess, just to be on the ball when you're taking calls, and make sure that you're not getting caught up in any sort of spam situation. But if it feels like a name that you recognise and the sort of offering that makes sense, there's no reason not to take the call. And if you're not sure as well, one of our pieces of advice, as with any financial institution, for example, is to take the name of the business calling you and say, look, I'm going to call you back. You can get the number from some paperwork you have, or do a quick Google search, and you can always call the company back and say, just if you're not sure if it's legitimate, once you call back and say, someone called me about X, Y, and Z, I'd like to talk about it, the company will be delighted to hear from you. Yeah,
use your common sense on that one. David, thanks very much indeed. Some good advice there from, the other end of the spectrum, the people who are having to make these calls, and just giving, obviously welcoming as well the fact that the rogue element is cracked down on, and some sensible advice to use common sense there. So thanks very much indeed, both to David Freeman and Adrian Barnard there with some great tips.